Welcome to a virtual Greenacre. If you've never been here before, here we are, anywhere in the world. You can be a Greenacre. Little did you know. If you've not been joining us yet, this is day 6, I believe.
Day
5. Day 5 of the daily honoring Abdu'l-Bahá's visit to Greenacre program. So Abdu'l-Bahá was here at Greenacre exactly 109 years ago. Starting this past Monday through next Monday, so the 16th through the 23rd. And we have our amazing scholar, author, artist, actress, Greenacre sole resident, Ann Perry, Dr. Ann Perry, who, if you don't know, is the primary author of the book Greenacre on the Piscataqua, which is a phenomenal book about the history of Greenacre. In fact, when I moved here 2.5 years ago, I did not know hardly anything about Greenacre. So I immediately picked that book up and I started reading it. And my jaw was just continually dropping in awe over the phenomenal history and destiny of Greenacre that all I knew was Abdu'l-Bahá had been here. That's all I knew. So thank you to Anne for writing that really groundbreaking work.
Yes, I just want to, sorry to interrupt, I just want to welcome Fadia, who I know is from Jordan. So, yeah.
Oh.
Hi, thank you, Said.
Very welcome. You missed the beautiful first 4 days. I wish you would have joined earlier, but.
Yeah, I was busy, yes.
Oh,
just better than late. Now better than late. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Honored.
Those videos will be posted. We did record, and they'll be posted on Greenacre's website for anybody who wants to watch them.
Okay.
And I'm going to pass it over to Anne. Oh, that's right. I'm supposed to sing a song. That's right. I started off by singing a song.
And
yes,
don't forget to tell us all to mute so that we can do the call and response.
So this is a call and response song. And if you've ever done a call and response via Zoom before, you know that you put yourself on mute. So I sing a line and then you sing that same line back. But you're the only one who can hear yourself because Zoom doesn't really work so well for call and response. Oh, there's Aruna in the waiting room. I'm letting her in. So this is taken from a tablet from Abdu'l-Bahá. And it's interesting, he talks about, it begins with, "Oh, ye real Baha'is of America." And it's quite a mouthful. So what I'll do is I'll sing the line and then I'll sing the same line again, which is what you would be singing. Sometimes if you were responding, you'd sing exactly what I sang the first time. When I sing it the second time, I may add some harmony to it, but don't let that confuse you. Okay, here we go. Oh, ye real Baha'is of America. 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 Praise be to His Highness the Desired One. Praise be to His Highness the Desired One, that ye have become confirmed, that ye have become confirmed in the promotion of divine teachings, in the promotion of divine teachings, and raise the call of the kingdom of God, raise the call of the kingdom of God. Oh, ye real Baha'is of America. 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 Thanks unto the Lord that ye have been assisted. Thanks unto the Lord that ye have been assisted and confirmed in this aim, and confirmed in this aim. This is purely through the confirmations. This is purely through the confirmations of the Lord of hosts. There's so many words in this song. The confirmations of the Lord of hosts. Oh, it's almost done. Oh, ye real Baha'is. No. Oh, ye real friends in all countries. Oh, ye real friends in all countries. Oh, ye real friends in all countries. Oh, ye real friends in all countries, they must realize the value of this bounty. They must realize the value of this bounty. They must arise like a shining star. They must arise like a shining star. Whew. It's like a marathon of words. Anyway, those are the words of Abdu'l-Bahá.
So thank you, Jessica. And it's so wonderful to be surrounded by all these real Baha'is from many places. And welcome to this series if you haven't been here before and if you're coming back. So let me share my screen and we'll start with Mahmoud today. And then we have some very special things about Fred Mortensen and so forth. So today is day 5 of the visit of Abdu'l-Bahá to Greenacre. It was a Tuesday, August 20th. And do we have a volunteer to read from Mahmoud? Laura?
I could read. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Sure. Among the friends visiting the master was Fred Mortensen, a youth who, prior to embracing the master, who had not made known his plans to visit the West. He traveled from Minneapolis to visit him. Because he could not afford to pay the price of a ticket from Minneapolis to Greenacre, he had ridden the rods under the train and in this way reached Chicago and Greenacre. He explained everything about his journey to the master, who then told him, "You are my guest." Each day, the master bestowed kindness upon him, and a few days later, he gave him money to pay for his journey home. Unknown to anyone, the master paid for many such expenses. Twice he sent a speaker from New York to Chicago and adjacent cities, and on each occasion, although the person was rich, Abdu'l-Bahá gave him more than enough money to defray the expenses of his journey. In addition, he liberally contributed to the poor and to the churches in which he spoke in every city. After speaking with her friends, he went to Miss Farmer's temporary residence in Portsmouth. When she saw Abdu'l-Bahá, she fell into such a state of rapture that every heart was moved. After comforting her and the others at Dr. Leroy's request, he went to see places of historic interest, including a yard where battleships were being built, the Navy Yard in Kittery. This activity did not please the master. On his return, he said, "While the manifestations of God are still alive, the people do not appreciate their value. They curse and execrate them. But after their ascension, they worship them. Such is the case with these tent dwellers who live outside Greenacre. Even Columbus and some ancient philosophers like Socrates were made to suffer, but after a time the people took pride in praising them. This afternoon, under the Persian pines and cypresses of that lovely plain, 300 people heard Abdu'l-Bahá draw a picture of the vista of of everlasting life, its spiritual station and eternal blessing. He then went to the Bahá'í house, where we were all guests. Following his walk after supper, the master stood at the front hall of the house. He spoke. People were even standing in the street to listen to him. He spoke so beautifully about the relationship of the East and the West that passersby stopped to hear what he had to say.
This is a picture in the pines. It probably isn't on the day Abdu'l-Bahá spoke, but you can imagine people gathered and sitting under the trees to hear him. Go ahead.
Okay. In the evening, there was musical entertainment and dancing in the hall of the inn. Abdu'l-Bahá said, "Such gatherings and practices are the cause of the corruption of morals." He also said this evening, "My thoughts are wholly absorbed by this journey. I can think of nothing else because the outcome of this journey is so great. Up to now in the cause of the Blessed Beauty, a development as great as this has not occurred."
Thank you, Laura. So, there's some ironies here. Like the day before, when the little girl danced for Abdu'l-Bahá, and he suggested this, Mr. Remy and the woman to dance together. And now he's making this statement about the corruption of morals. So I think we have to take this as sort of balancing our thoughts about spirituality and earthly things, right? This other statement, let's read it again. Laura, if you could read this, it's such an incredible quotation here about the journey, starting with my. Go ahead.
My thoughts are wholly absorbed by this journey. I can think of nothing else because the outcome of this journey is so great. Up to now in the cause of the Blessed Beauty, a development as great as this has not occurred.
And of course, we have Shoghi Effendi's beautiful words about the journey that really describes and defines the import of this incredible journey. And we also have in Montreal, Abdu'l-Bahá alludes to the fact that the journey will be appreciated later. And of course, now we're, over 100 years later, and we are getting a glimmer of the incredible, profound impact that this journey had and the seeds that were sown. So now going back to the story of Fred, and I haven't asked anyone in advance to read this, although I could have asked Nigel or Saeed or someone to practice it, but I haven't. So do we have a volunteer to read this passage from Fred's own words?
I volunteer, Nigel.
And I should have sent him the script in advance so he can rehearse, but he has a beautiful voice. Just know that Fred was from Minneapolis, not from UK. Go ahead, Nigel.
Take one. Fred Mortensen's account of his arrival at Greenacre. The Boston and Maine Railway was the last link between Abdu'l-Bahá and the outside world. And when I crawled off from the top of one of its passenger trains at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I was exceedingly happy, my heart beating double time. I stepped onto the soil of that to-be-famous center, tired, dirty, and wondering, but happy. Arriving at the hotel, I found quite a number of people there on the same mission to see Abdu'l-Bahá. Being one of the last arrivals, I looked around to make myself comfortable when someone exclaimed, "Here he comes now." Ahmad Sohrab did the introducing and interpreting. When Ahmad introduced me to him, to my astonishment, he looked at me and only said, not offering to shake hands with me. Coming as I had, and feeling as I did, I was very much embarrassed. After greeting several others and when about to go to his room, he suddenly turned to me and said in a gruff voice, at least I thought so, "Sit down," and pointed to a chair, which I didn't care to do as elderly ladies were standing. But what was I to do? I meekly obeyed, feeling rebellious over what had happened. Such a welcome after making that difficult trip. It seemed but a minute until Ahmad came down and said, "Abdu'l-Bahá wishes to see Mr. Mortensen." Why, I nearly wilted. I wasn't ready. I hadn't expected to be called until the very last thing. He welcomed me with a smile and a warm hand clasp, telling me to be seated, he sitting before me. His first words were, "Welcome, welcome. You are very welcome." And then, "Are you happy?" which was repeated 3 times. I thought, why do you ask me that so many times? Of course I am happy. Didn't I tell you so the first time? Then, where did you come from? Answer, from Minneapolis. Question, do you know Mr. Hall? Answer, yes, he taught me about the cause. Question, did you have a pleasant journey? Of all the questions I wished to avoid, this was the one. I dropped my gaze to the floor, and again he put the question. I lifted my eyes to his, and his were as 2 black sparkling jewels, which seemed to look into my very depths. I know he knew, and I must tell. And as I answered, I wondered what Ahmad thought, as if I were a little unbalanced. I answered, I did not come as people generally do who come to see you. Question. How did you come? Answer. Riding under and on top of the railway trains. Question. Explain how. Now, as I looked into the eyes of Abdu'l-Bahá, I saw they had changed, and wondrous light seemed to pour out. It was the light of love, and I felt relieved and very much happier. I explained to him how I rode on the trains, after which he kissed both my cheeks, gave me much fruit, and kissed the dirty hat I wore, which had become soiled on my trip to see him. When he was ready to leave Greenacre, I stood nearby to say goodbye, and to my astonishment he ordered me to get into the automobile with him. After a week with him at Malden, Massachusetts, I left for home with never-to-be-forgotten memories of a wonderful event, the meeting of God's covenant.
Thank you so much, Nigel. You even sounded American doing that.
Beautiful.
When I was a kid, I used to be able to switch it on and off. I can't do it anymore.
Well, you did a great job. Thank you. And it really brought it to life. And what a precious, priceless story this is. So Juliet Thompson has her own take on it. So I'll read this one. Fred Mortensen, hearing that Abdobaha was in Greenacre and having no money to make the trip, had ridden the bumpers to his presence. He came into the meeting and sat down and was very unhappy when the master, pacing back and forth as he talked, took no notice of him. But no sooner was the meeting over and the master upstairs in his room than he sent for Fred. Fred had said nothing to anyone about his trip on the bumpers. But the minute he entered that upstairs room, the master asked, smiling and with twinkling eyes, "How did you enjoy your ride?" Then he took from Fred's hand his suit-covered cap and kissed it. Now, one of these days, we'll show the scene, the Greenacre section from Luminous Journey, in which we visualized the story, and it was in Abdu'l-Bahá's room. And of course, we could not portray the master, but we have Fred, we have someone taking the cap, without showing hands, of course, from Fred. So there's that little symbolic gesture of the kiss on the hat. So that's Juliet's version. Now this, switching gears slightly, is the place where Sarah was staying in Portsmouth under the care of Dr. Cowles, who was a famous therapist doctor at those times. And he wanted to keep her there because she was a pretty famous patient. And, anyway, so she was there for several years. And that's where Abdu'l-Bahá went to see her and also had her brought over to Greenacre from there. So now we have a description relating to Sarah and Abdu'l-Bahá. Would someone like to read this? Maybe one of the young ladies?
From Greenacre on the Piscataqua. On August 20th, Abdu'l-Bahá also visited Sarah in Portsmouth, and together they viewed places of historic interest, including the Navy Yard and Kittery. When they arrived at Greenacre, before alighting from the car, he kissed her on the cheek. This occasion must have been particularly poignant for Sarah, who had not been to Greenacre since 1909. Several of those present during the week of the master's visit remarked on the special connection between Sarah and Abdu'l-Bahá. Margaret Klebs later recalled, "The great genius of Sarah J. Farmer, with her unconquerable devotion and willpower, prepared the way for the appearance of our Holy Master. Never to be forgotten is the picture when the beloved one held her in his arms, driving slowly around the Greenacre fields. Blessed are we who could witness it."
So thank you so much. Lovely. A priceless description, really. And this photograph is the only one I believe that exists of Abdu'l-Bahá kissing someone. And it was our own dear Sarah Farmer. whose vision he had confirmed so long before in 1900 when she visited him in Acre. And here he was 12 years later visiting her at her very special place, Greenacre. And you can see the inn behind the motor car. Okay, who would like to read this short passage by Ella Robarts?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Abdu'l-Bahá told Mrs. McKinney to tell me that he would give a feast in our house on Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. The weather was perfect, and there were about 100 people on the veranda and on the lawn and even across the road. Abdu'l-Bahá gave us a beautiful talk. Ella Robards.
Thank you, Susie. Okay, somebody else about the 19-day feast?
I will read.
Please.
About the 19-day feast, August 29th, 1912, by I.V. Edward. The Charles Rogers house, where I lived for 1 year, was where the talk was given by Abdu'l-Bahá at the Feast of Names on the piazza of Rogers House, August 20th, 1912. This feast was given to all the people of Eliot, as well as those at Greenacre. I shall always remember and treasure the great power emanating from the master as he walked back and forth on the veranda to where I was sitting on the rail at the entrance of the house, talking to the people who covered the grounds into the road across to the waiting station, entrance to Greenacre. Everyone seemed transported at the time into the world from which he was giving us profound spiritual truths.
It's wonderful how so often there's these statements about everyone was transported, or, there was great enthusiasm. And so, words probably can't suffice to explain all this. But here's the veranda. Okay, we don't have a picture of Abdu'l-Bahá here, but you see the lanterns that were hung all the way down the road toward the inn. There's 3 of them hanging on the porch here. And then he must have paced up and down. The porch goes all the way around this house, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a minute. But I just as an aside, this is the trolley station that was right across the road from that house. And you can see Roger's cottage next to it. And here's a trolley, and I'm not sure which year this picture was taken, but the original trolley house. And then this is now the restored trolley house. But I have to tell you, for a few years, the trolley house existed in another part of Eliot. And we went and photographed there. But for decades, it was, displaced. And then a few years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, it was brought back to Greenacre and it was restored. And it was placed just a little further down and on the opposite side of the road. So here's the inn, and here's where it stands now. And these pictures were ones I took in winter 2019. And then this is the picture I took just a few days ago, or someone else took, because I'm sitting here on the porch of it. And I appeared in the window, and there's a circle of chairs with prayer books in there, very precious place. And of course, there may have been no gathering since before the pandemic, but everything's just left as it was. And again, you can see the relationship to the inn. Now, I'm going to share some personal pictures here. They're not going to be on the Greenacre website in the PDF, but I put them for you today just to share something about my visit to Greenacre during the last week. So I did put my Sarah Farmer costume on, and Tim took some pictures of me with the trolley station as a background. And again, you can see the inn. And a few days before that, I'd gone to the library where there's a portrait of Sarah Farmer with her dog, Barry. And as Sarah Farmer, I told stories. It was an open house for the library. And I told stories of Eliot and Greenacre and the library that Sarah had helped to nurture in her day. And then I went to a picnic celebrating Maine's bicentenary. It was all happening the same week we were there, amazingly. And this is a family that is part of the Greenacre staff, Sisai from Ethiopia and his lovely wife, Laurel, and their children. And here's Frank, who's also on the Greenacre staff, and his daughter. And then these are from 2012 when we went to shoot the Greenacre scene for Luminous Journey. So the house where Abdu'l-Bahá gave the feast is right here, and you can see the road, which is, it's a small country road, but it's fairly busy. But according to the descriptions, people were outside the house, on the veranda, and across the road, and probably in the road. So these are our actors in costumes that we had dressed up for the reenactment. And then amazingly, and I think I've told this story to you before, but just as I said to Roseanne, the archivist, we need one of those lanterns, you know, to hang in this picture. A car drove up and brought the only surviving lantern to us at the very moment after I said that, which was an astonishing, amazing thing, because they didn't know. They just sent it over from Portsmouth thinking we might want to look at the lantern. And so we did hang it, and we shot the scene there. So we call that the magic lantern scene. Now back to the past. So this is the house with the veranda and the little porch area where you saw those people sitting. So this is our last paragraph for today. Who would like to read that?
I'll read it.
Go ahead.
From Greenacre on the Pasquata Qua. Later on August 20th, at the Greenacre Pines, over 300 people gathered to hear Abdu'l-Bahá's address. After dinner, he hosted a unity feast from the porch of what he called Bahá'í home, then Elliott House, and now Staples Cottage. We have only a few sketchy descriptions of the feast. Alice Toby Cummings remembered the round peppermints that Ella Roberts had brought at Abdu'l-Bahá's request for the refreshment table at the feast, some of which she and Louise Thompson saved and for years distributed to the friends on special occasions. She also remembered Abdu'l-Bahá saying that he had left enough spirit at Greenacre to bring dry bones to life.
Thank you. Okay, now for our quiz, our questions. How did Fred Mortensen get to Greenacre? Was it A, first-class American Airlines flight, B, skateboard, C, luxury sleeper car on the train, or D, riding the rods below and above the train cars? Anyone know the answer?
He took the Pullman, didn't he?
Well, you read it. Any other comments?
He pulled himself along on the rods.
Yes. And you know, his family describes how hard this was because you had to stay awake because otherwise you would let go and, you know, be crushed, you know, fall.
That photo that you have, Anne, what is that? Is that a photo from a magazine or a movie or something? What is that photo?
The photo of Fred Mortensen?
Yeah, hanging his, it's some, I don't know if it's him, but hanging some, go back to that photo.
Yeah, it's not actually him. It's just a photo of someone riding the rods. You know, we don't have, there was no documentarian that, here's the photo.
Yeah.
It's not Fred, but it just shows how people did it. I don't advise it as a method of travel, but apparently,
Oh my.
you know.
And quite literally, is it that little skinny rod at the bottom, like you could fall either way, like you're inches from the track, right?
Right. And well, I haven't tried this, so I don't know exactly how it feels, but at any rate, it must have been quite dangerous.
Yeah.
But thank you for asking about the picture, because again, no one documented Fred's trip exactly, except in words. But
His family is still alive. I met, was it a granddaughter perhaps at Greenacre one year?
Oh, wow.
his daughter, Fred's daughter, well, he had 4 children. You know that Abdu'l-Bahá said to him that he would have 4 blessings, and he had 4 children. And that was often Abdu'l-Bahā's way of saying a child was coming to you. And he actually had 5 children because they adopted 1. But I don't know that much about the family, but I do have a CD that we're going to listen to if we have time today of them talking about it. Okay, 2, the master reprimanded him, saying one shouldn't spend such wealth on luxury, you know, when he flew or took the sleep. Reprimanded him, saying he shouldn't be a freeloader, or beamed upon him, gave him fruit, and kissed his dirty hat, or refused to see him until all of the wealthy society people had their time with him. Which is the answer?
C.
I think everyone would agree with that. Okay, what word describes the state Sarah Farmer fell into when she saw the master? It starts with an R.
Rapture.
Rapture. Okay, what was part of Abdu'l-Bahā's unity feast? Was it round peppermints, lemonade, scones, or an elaborate dinner?
Round peppermints.
The peppermints. Now, Roseanne didn't show us any. There may still be some of these in the archives. I haven't seen them, but at any rate, perhaps there's still some. Okay, according to Alice Toby Cummings, at the Unity Feast, Abdu'l-Bahá spoke about the tablets of the divine plan. Abdu'l-Bahá said he had left enough spirit at Greenacre to bring dry bones to life. Abdu'l-Bahá gave everyone gathered a new name, or Abdu'l-Bahá asked the fortune tellers to predict the future of Greenacre.
B.
Okay.
B.
Yes, he left enough spirit. And that photograph where his hand is going downwards, I always think of that spirit is being, you know, given from his being.
Plant.
Yes.
Planted. That spirit is being planted there.
Right, right. Okay, dear friends, I have several audiovisual opportunities today. So let me share with you that first from the archives, we recorded Roseanne sharing with us, and I just did it on my iPhone. So it's, you know, without a tripod or anything. But here's the short video. It's 5 minutes. I know you're going to want to see this.
Abdu'l-Bahá visited Greenacre from August 16th to 23rd in 1912. Harlan Rover said that with Abdu'l-Bahā's visit, the entire status of Greenacre underwent a change. A most wonderful peace descended upon Greenacre and upon Eliot. His love included everyone, none were left out. He was a charmer of hearts and a lover beyond compare. He gave several talks, some of which appear in Promulgation of Universal Peace. He visited the homes of friend and foe alike and Lanier Camp and captivated all whom he met. He saw Miss Farmer and talked most lovingly and advised her. On August 20th, Abdu'l-Bahá gave a feast for the Baha'is and the people of Eliot at what was then called the Bahá'í home. Ellen Robarts tells us that Abdu'l-Bahá told Carrie Kinney that he would give the feast at the home she was staying with on Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. The weather was perfect. There were about 100 people on the veranda and on the lawn and even across the road. Ella says Abdu'l-Bahá gave us a beautiful talk. Ivy Edwards, who was there, says, I shall always remember and treasure the great power emanating from the master as he walked back and forth on the veranda to where I was sitting on the rail at the entrance of the house, talking to the people who covered the grounds into the road across to the waiting station at the entrance of Greenacre. Everyone seemed transported at the time into the world from which he was giving us profound spiritual truths. This is a cup that was used by Abdu'l-Bahá to drink from during his Unity Feast on the 20th of August at Staples House, or as it was called, the Bahá'í Home. And also we have a picture of the tea here that was served, that Ivy Edwards saved, and the picture of a group that's sitting on the veranda, which was spoken about in the reminiscence. While he was here, Abdu'l-Bahá had Sarah brought back to Greenacre with him, and they visited the grounds. And we also have a picture of, it's really 1897, but it shows the great tent where Abdu'l-Bahá spoke and the tent camp.
And that's the peace flag on the flagpole?
That's the peace flag on the flagpole and a naval flag honoring Professor Abdu'l-Bahá from England, who was at Greenacre at the time.
And what is the shawl, Roseanne?
The shawl that we have is not really from his visit to Greenacre, but is from his visit to Boston, Massachusetts, where he was a guest of Maria Wilson. It belonged to Mrs. Geraldine Gordon, and she says that Abdu'l-Bahá was brought to her house by Maria in an open car, and the afternoon suddenly turned cool, and she had a paisley shawl, which she lent him to wear to keep him warm while she was riding around. The key belonged to Helen Ellis Cole, and it was a key that was used for a tin box in which the tablets that were brought to her in New York were kept in 1912. And there's a note on it that says Abdu'l-Bahá has the other key to that box. We don't know what happened to the original box, but that was given to the archives and kept by Kate Ives, who was the first archivist for the Greenacre and the Bahá'í community.
And the first American Bahá'í woman that we know of.
And the first American Bahá'í woman.
Precious items. Thank you so much, Roseanne. Is there anything else you want to share?
You're welcome.
Okay, so she couldn't be here today, but wasn't that a wonderful video that we made that was able to share some archives? Thank you. So I have, in the time we have left, if that's okay, I have one of two audio offerings. One of them is the monologue of Fred that we recorded with Kevin Paris, and the script is a little different than what Nigel read. And the other is an 11-minute description by his children of his meeting with Abdu'l-Bahá. Which would you rather hear?
The children.
Both.
Okay, both. Well, let's start with the children, and then we'll
And Kate Ives was the first female American Baha'i, is that right?
mhm.
And the first Elliott archivist?
Yes.
Cool.
And he lived in Elliott, and he visited her house while he was there.
Thank you. I know that your father had a dream of Abdu'l-Bahá, and that led him to Greenacre. Can one of you share that story with us?
He had this dream in which he saw Abdu'l-Bahá, and he was being a host to a large number of people, and they were all seated at this long banquet table. And Abdu'l-Bahá was walking around behind them, talking to them, and being a wonderful host, as he always was, making sure they were all comfortable. And he determined that he was going to go see Abdu'l-Bahá in Greenacre then. So at that point, having no money, he decided to use some of his other talents that he had learned after he left Minneapolis as a fugitive. And that was how to hop on trains and go wherever you want by riding the rods or riding on top, which was very dangerous. And he rode from Cleveland to Boston in that fashion, having to stay awake and make sure that he held on to these rods. And he decided that the rest of the trip he was going to take by riding on top of the train. And this, of course, both cases, you ended up being very dirty from the soot of the train and the dirt that came off of the tracks and all this sort of thing. So he made his way over to Greenacre, came into Greenacre, a very disreputable looking person, dirty, clothes messy.
After he arrived there, he knocked on the door, and Barbara Fitting, was it not?
Barbara Fitting and Mrs. Kenny of New York.
Met him, and they took one look at him and decided if he wanted to see Abdu'l-Bahá, they would have to have him cleaned up a little bit. So the two women got together and got him all cleaned up the best they could do. And the next morning he was to hopefully meet Abdu'l-Bahá.
He arrived in Greenacre after this trip, very tired. It was in the evening, very dirty, and obviously they thought he was a tramp or some disreputable type of person. And he stopped some of the Bahá'í men to talk to them. And he said they obviously didn't want him there, wouldn't tell him anything, and literally told him to go away because they didn't think that Abdu'l-Bahá would want to see this type of person. And he didn't go away because he came too far to go give up that easily. So he decided to go to one of these cottages and knock on the door and see if he could rouse somebody, and maybe they would tell him where Abdu'l-Bahá was and what he had to do. Two women answered the door, and one was Barbara Fitting, and the other was Mrs. Kenny. They were middle-aged ladies, and of course, if you have in mind that period in history, it was rather improper for them to be inviting strange men into their home, and certainly nobody to chaperone this situation. But they did. And they probably had all the same misgivings that any of us would have inviting a strange, disreputable looking person into our home. But whatever those feelings were, they wanted him to come in and they wanted to help him. So they told him he had to get cleaned up, number one, to see Abdu'l-Bahá. And number two, he couldn't just go and walk in. There were all these people that were going to speak to him. They all had appointments. And that maybe if he went there, he could at least see Abdu'l-Bahá. That it wouldn't be a total waste of his time. He could at least see him when he came in.
So he went to the meeting place in the morning, and Abdu'l-Bahá had just finished interviewing a person who had been an author on a book about love. And after that interview was completed, Abdu'l-Bahá indicated that he wanted to see Fred Mortensen next. Well, this upset my father something awful because he was the last one in, and there were all kinds of people there before him. And he was astonished. And Abdu'l-Bahá, sure enough, had him come in next.
Kay, you wanted to add something to what your brothers just said.
The day before my father arrived in Greenacre, Abdu'l-Bahá told his interpreters and whoever else was there to go out and get a very large basket of fruit because he was expecting a very important person. So they did do this. They went out and they got this very, very large basket of fruit.
Fred, would you continue with the story where you left off?
The visit with Abdu'l-Bahá proved to be a very interesting one for them. And Abdu'l-Bahá asked Fred Mortensen how did he get there? How did he manage to get to Greenacre from Minneapolis? So my father didn't want to tell him that he'd been riding under and on the top of trains and what have you. But Abdu'l-Bahá insisted that he tell him. Finally, he relented and he said, well, I didn't travel as most people do. I traveled under and over tops of trains, in between walks and various other things, until I got to Greenacre. And Abdu'l-Bahá was content with that. He was satisfied. And I guess he knew it all the time. So then they were discussing various things, and Abdu'l-Bahá was always interested in whether somebody was happy or not. And he would give my father some fruit.
Well, my father said he never ate so much fruit in his life as he ate that day, because every time he would eat a piece, Abdu'l-Bahá would insist that he take another. But one of the things he did say with Abdu'l-Bahá, I asked him, how did you get here? And he hedged and stuff. And he finally decided to tell him the truth. And one of the things he said that impressed me, that Abdu'l-Bahā's eyes changed. And they became like jewels, sparkling jewels, when he finally told the truth. And I think that was at that moment that my dad became a Bahá'í.
As Kay had mentioned, they finally ate up all the fruit. And Abdu'l-Bahá, in the meantime, had been holding an apple. And he finally gave it to my father. And when my father took it, it was just warm from Abdu'l-Bahā's hands. He did eat the apple, and Abdu'l-Bahá said to him, "You will have many blessings."
He even numbered the blessings. He said he would have 4 blessings, which of course, my dad had no idea what that meant. And in reading some of the stories later on about Abdu'l-Bahá, I discovered that that was his habit. When somebody said they didn't have a child, you know, like Mrs. Maxwell, she was without children, and both she and her husband were so upset about it, but he also gave them a piece of fruit and said that they would be blessed. And she turned out to be the guardian's wife. But he did that. He would either give you a piece of candy or a piece of fruit, and then tell you that you had his blessing. Unaware, he had these 4 blessings of what it was. And he also told my father that he knew he was married at the time to this other woman, but that marriage would not last. Yeah, and it was right, the marriage did not last. But in any case, the next day, Abdu'l-Bahá was leaving Greenacre, and as they drove, the Baha'is lined the street just to wave goodbye to him. And as he drove by, he had to stop the car, and he told my father, "Get in." And my dad said that's all he said. And then he found himself in Malden, Massachusetts, with Abdu'l-Bahá for a week.
I think that's it. So the CD has a number of cuts on it, and that was the chapter about meeting Abdu'l-Bahá. And it goes on to share a tablet that Abdu'l-Bahá revealed for Fred, and some of Fred's favorite prayers, and more about the family and such. So somewhere I have that CD around here. So that was interesting. I hope you found that interesting. And now, looking at the time, we can either stop now, or if you want to hear the monologue, which is about 9 minutes, 47 seconds. Nigel seems to want to hear the monologue. Jessica, what do you think?
That is fine. I will need to leave before then that is over. But I can make you, Aaron, the host. And then when you all want to end, you can just click end. Okay,
thank you. And I don't know if Mabel Ives may be related to Kate Ives, but I've asked Rob Stockman. So we'll see if the answer comes maybe today or tomorrow. I'll be able to report that. It'd be interesting to see if there's a connection there. Mm-hmm. So again, this is an audio recording, so I'm sorry I don't have video to go with this, but those who want to stay and hear this monologue, I'll start that now.
Fred Mortensen was born into extreme poverty in an urban environment. His father, an immigrant from Denmark, tried to soften the urban poverty immigrant experience by turning to alcohol when the trials of life got the best of him. His mother tried to steer Fred away from a life of bad choices, but after the 3rd grade, he dropped out of school in order to work. A street life followed. He stole from others and bullied his way around the slums of Minneapolis and was eventually arrested. Albert Hall, who was a follower of the Baha'i faith, was appointed as his attorney and gave Fred a Baha'i book and a dictionary. Sometime later, Fred managed to overpower a guard and escaped. For the next 4 years, he lived as a fugitive while traveling in other states. But once he accepted the Baha'i faith, his life began to change. Although still a fugitive, he returned to Minneapolis in his mid-20s and lived without further encounters with the police. When he heard the news about Abdu'l-Bahá's visit to America, he decided to go to Greenacre in Elliott, Maine to meet him. This version of the story of Fred Mortensen is read by Kevin Paris.
I love railway stations. I love trains. I have many memories of trains, some good, some bad. I wasn't always the sober citizen you see before you now. Oh, no, sir. Were not for certain events involving trains and railroads, no doubt my life would have taken a very different turn. My parents were immigrants to the United States from Denmark. My father, he was a violin player. Quite good, my mom said. When we arrived in America, though, times were hard. I had 12 siblings, but only 5 survived. My father tried to escape the effects of poverty and the harsh life we had in the slums with alcohol. He became a slave to the bottle and began to live in the taverns instead of home. Eventually, one day, he didn't come back. I tried to help my mom feed the family. Got my first job at age 10. I was treated like a slave by my employers, so I figured out ways to make more off the streets. My poor mother. She tried her best to keep me on the straight and narrow. But I fell in with a bad crowd. The wrong people. Dropped out of school after the 3rd grade. Was in a gang of hooligans roaming the streets, stealing, fighting. I used to throw a brick or rock through the front window of a store and steal all the fruit I could grab. I spent half my youth in and out of prison. When I was 20, one of my younger brothers and I went to the train station, broke into a mail car and stole a mail bag. The railroad detectives spotted us and gave chase. They were catching up, and rather than let my little brother get caught, I took the mail bag from him and we ran in opposite directions. Came up to a high wall, jumped over it, and bam, I broke my leg on landing. The coppers caught me and I was arrested. Strangely, that's when my life began to change for the better. At my trial, the court appointed a man named Albert Hall to be my defense lawyer. He was a good man. His heart burned with loving kindness for all who crossed his path, even the criminals like me. For the first time, someone apart from my mother took a sincere interest in my life. Mr. Hall seemed to see something in me that no one else ever had. He didn't just use legal science to give me another chance. He appealed to spiritual resources. One of the first things he did was give me a Bahá'í book and a dictionary for me to look up all the words I would have learned from the 4th grade on. Mr. Hall gave of his time, too. He took me out on parole and spent hour after hour telling me about the great love that someone called Abdu'l-Bahá had for all his children. He talked so much of love of God, love of Baha'u'llah, love of all the divine prophet. And he explained that Abdu'l-Bahā's purpose was to show us how to love our fellow man. I still wasn't out of the woods, though, and I was far from reformed yet. One day, while in my cell, I lured the guard over to me, and when he got close enough, I reached through the bars and grabbed him by the throat through the bars, choking him until he passed out. I took his keys and escaped from prison. For the next 4 years, I lived as a fugitive. Life wasn't easy, wandering from state to state across the north and west. Then I heard that Abdu'l-Bahá was visiting the east coast of America. I remembered the kindness and love of Mr. Hall, so I wanted to see him for myself. I was afraid he may not travel to the west, so I managed to get to Cleveland, but ran out of money there. While I was in Cleveland, I had a powerful dream of Abdu'l-Bahá. A fire was kindled inside me, and I knew I absolutely had to meet him. He was at Greenacre in Maine. Maine? Could he get any further away? But I was desperate not to miss him, so I had no choice but to fall back on some old tricks I knew. I hoboed my way to the East Coast. I couldn't buy a ticket to sit inside. I could jump on and off the outside of the train for free. When I arrived at Greenacre, I felt like I was at the gate of paradise. My heart was beating double time. Now he was astonishingly near. I looked at myself, though. Oh boy, I was a mess, covered in soot, dirt, and coal dust from head to toe from riding the bumpers. I had no way to clean up for days. I was truly embarrassed of my appearance, and the ladies who were staring at me looked truly horrified. Then Abdu'l-Bahá arrived. He took no notice of me, it seemed, but still I wanted to leave after just a few minutes and clean up. But he said rather sternly, "Sit down." Oh, that was certainly must be because he knew how I stole a ride to get there. There had been a long list of names of people who signed up to talk with Abdu'l-Bahá privately after the meeting, and I had put my name at the very bottom. I knew there wasn't much chance that someone like me would be allowed to talk with him. The first person who went up was a doctor, and after only a minute or two, I was the second person the master sent for. He greeted me with a big smile, and his first words were, "Welcome, welcome. You are very welcome here." Then he asked me 3 times, "Are you happy? Are you happy? Are you happy?" Words cannot express my happiness then. Then he looked at me with a twinkle in his eye and asked, "Did you have a pleasant journey?" Of all the questions I wished to avoid, this was the one. I had told no one of my trip riding the rails, and I didn't want to answer. I looked at the floor silent, but again he asked, and I knew he already knew, so I had to tell him. I was riding under and on top of railway cars. He simply replied, "Explain how." I looked into his eyes, and now they were like brilliant, sparkling jewels. wondrous light poured out, shining directly on me. It was the light of wonderful love. I explained how I rode on the trains, and when I was finished, he kissed both my cheeks and gave me so much fruit, I didn't have to steal any of it. And he took the dirty, soot-covered hat off my head and kissed it too. The last thing he told me was that I would soon have 4 blessings. I was a changed man after that, and I had never had any trouble with the law again. I accepted Baha'u'llah fully into my heart and found my calling. I didn't want to steal from others. Instead, I wanted to sacrifice for them, for Baha'u'llah, the way he sacrificed for us. I dedicated the rest of my life to promoting the unity of humanity. Do you know what my 4 blessings were? Soon after meeting him, I met a very beautiful girl who found me worthy of marriage. We had 4 lovely children, all of whom became Baha'is. To think of those moments with him. My hat was so dirty on the outside. This hat, yet kissed it. I was a dust-covered mess, yet he kissed me. These events are engraved upon the tablet of my heart. The words of Baha'u'llah, as Abdu'l-Bahá shared with us, are my food, my drink, and my life. He said, all men were created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization.
So that was another version of the story, and that's on this CD. It's called Encounters with Abdobaha, and we recorded various monologues, but that was read by a friend of ours who's not a Baha'i, who's a local actor and director. So on the CD, we have Juliet Thompson, Fred Mortensen, John Good, Louis and Louisa Gregory, Thornton Chase, Howard Colby Ives, and others. I've forgotten who the others are. Oh, Josie McFadden, who's a fictional person in Edinburgh, and A Cup of Tea, a monologue by Roger White about a fictional woman, and I portray that person, but she doesn't have a name. So, well, friends, yes, Nigel.
Sorry, if we have just a couple of minutes more. I retired recently from decades of working on the railway, both in the UK and in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I can speak quite strongly about the risks and the unpleasantness of riding the rails as Fred did. If you have just a moment.
Yes,
it won't be very long. The problem was that both on top and underneath, he was constantly risking his life. If he was underneath, he was stretched between those stretcher bars. The purpose of those, because the carriages were wooden, the purpose of those was to keep a tension in the carriage so that it would hold together, because don't forget that it's not straight and level rails. We're talking going over switches and points, changing from one track to another. And every time it does that, there's a sideways force. And the coaches need to be kept together. Now, if you're riding underneath, you're out of a lot of the smoke and the soot, but you're in the dust because the tracks have gravel. I would call it, we call it ballast, but that's its technical name, but it's gravel, and it is always deteriorating and constantly making dust. And every time the train goes over it, it sucks that up as the pressure of the air of the train going over it goes. So he'd be covered in dust from the ballast if he didn't slip off. And he could slip off every time the train changed tracks or went around a corner. If he wasn't alert, he'd be sliding off, and that would be him under the wheels of the train. And many people have been killed. I can attest to that. I know quite a lot of that. If he went up top, then he was out of the dust and he wouldn't fall between the rods. But the top of the coach normally wasn't flat, it was rounded, and he could roll off. And instead of having dust, he would have, remember, these are steam trains. He would have smoke, and he would have steam, and he would have soot coming out of the getting to be an old man.
Chimney.
Yeah, chimney. Yeah. So either way, you get it. You get things in your eyes. You get things all over you. So he would have been a real mess. It's up 700 and some odd miles from Cleveland to Elliott, and that's a long time to be dodging. Now, the one last thing I didn't mention was the bulls. As the train would go through yards, there would be men employed, because a lot of people tried, hobos were traveling that way. They would have big steel bats, and they would look up and down the train for people who were stealing a ride. And if the bull got to you, these are security people, they hit you first and ask questions second. So he really put his life really.
What would be the speed of train at that time, the steam trains?
40, 50, 60 miles an hour. Passengers would go faster than freights.
Okay.
But nothing over 60. I mean, when the trains here in the UK set the world's record, that was set at 100 miles an hour. So we're talking much slower than that for freights.
But still, with the weather and the soot and everything, it must have been really hard. And he had a hard life, as we've heard. And the interesting thing about the story is really about class, that Abdu'l-Bahá did not distinguish. He wants us to be a friend to all, regardless of gender, race, class, and other differences that we have. And so when he favored Fred, it must have been very strange for people of that day who were very class conscious and very conscious of race and of gender as well. And so, in every country where Abdu'l-Bahá traveled, there are such stories, how he went against the prevailing attitudes of the time to embrace unity. Okay, so Julie says she had the cassette tape. I do have that in the other room. Her name is Greenacre, and I listened to it recently. And so I tracked down the files, and Larry Hosak was kind enough to rip an old CD so that he can share the files. And I think he'll do so. You don't have to pay him or anything. Just tell him, Anne told me that you can share this with me, because I've already gotten permission from Chris Rue, who made the original CD. And Chris is out at Desert Rose now doing a 24-hour radio station through Desert Rose Bahá'í Institute, which you can access. And it's a lot of it's music, and a lot of it's just on, automatic programming, but there are interviews and such like that. Yes, Abdu'l-Bahá gave Fred fruit, which is something that he had stolen. And in the monologue it comments, I didn't even have to steal it to get it, right? So all these stories have great impact. Think about how Fred Mortensen, and I shared the other day that he was one trusted with the money to take to Haifa some years later. And the irony of that he had been a petty thief, and now he was entrusted with this monetary errand that was, I'm sure he was fully responsible and all that. And his, the memories of his children are from this CD. And I believe you could still track this down. It's At the Gate of the Garden, a tribute to Fred Mortensen. And there's 10 different cuts on that. Well, dear friends, this has been wonderful, and thank you for your attention and your love of Abdu'l-Bahá and of these stories. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. What is the access?
And Laura was trying to say something.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for, it's okay. It's just another observation is that not only was it terrible on the reels, but also the noise, the sound had have been deafening. And I was thinking that here he was a man who was a criminal, you know, for most of his life. And actually it was all those, all everything that he learned as a criminal that helped him to endure that journey. So even that was, you know, that when we think about the crooked roads becoming straight, even, you know, Baha'u'llah took even that and made it an advantage for him, you know.
Exactly.
That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, Susie, that's wonderful. She put the Facebook page for the Cure radio station in there. So together, you see, we can solve these questions and problems that we have. And certainly Fred didn't have any earbuds or any nice headphones to, you know, reduce the sound on that trip. But we wish he had, and certainly his spirit is probably thrilled in the next world that so many people are remembering him today.
And just one small question. What was the diagnosis for Sarah Farmer? What was really happening to her during those years before Abdu'l-Bahá, right?
You know, it's interesting. Some people called her insane, but Abdobaha said she had a state of exaltation. And I think that for many women back then, if they had the slightest bit of depression or anything like that, you know, they were sometimes just sent away. And when she was younger and she would have a nervous collapse, the popular cure was a trip to Europe. And so she went on one of these trips, and it was on the boat on one of these trips where she realized that her life was sort of vain and selfish, and she wanted to commit herself to doing good deeds. And some years later, she became a Bahá'í. So we have to picture, you know, she had a wealthy background, but didn't have a lot of means, you know, after her father passed, and, you know, she was sort of giving away Greenacre to whoever wanted to come. And then, you know, it was just determined that it was in her best interest to send her off to a sanatorium. And I wish we had more records of what that was like for her.
There was nothing you could find at the sanitarium?
I haven't done extensive research, but maybe Jonathan Menon has more about Dr. Cowles and his records. You know, he's writing the definitive book about Sarah Farmer, and he received the original manuscript of Douglas Martin, which I have a copy here too, of his master's thesis that Douglas always hoped to publish as a book, but Jonathan is moving that project forward. So a lot will come to light, I think, not necessarily through my work, but through others' work who will have the time and the longevity to bring it to light.
Do you know how old she was when Abdu'l-Bahá arrived?
She was born in 1847. What would that make her, 50 something? 1847.
6 plus 12. 6. She was almost the same age as Abdu'l-Bahá.
Oh, 6.
Only 3 years younger.
Okay, 65, right?
Yeah.
And then she died when she was 69.
The year after Abdu'l-Bahá.
Right.
Thank you.
1916. So, wow. Okay, dear friends, so much to say, but we'll save a little bit for tomorrow. How about that? Thank you. And
thank you. Thank you.
And is it the same session at noon? Is it the same session at noon? Because I don't have it in my calendar.
It's the same Zoom.
Same Zoom. Okay, thank you.
We'll see you here tomorrow.
All right, bye-bye. I love it.
Bye.